Okay, good evening, welcome to the budget workshop. I think we're ready to start.
Somebody's speakers is coming through now.
Turn your speakers down, Laura.
You gotta mute yourself.
Yeah, mute yourself, I think.
Is that what it is? Sorry.
That's better, yeah. Okay, we're going to have to ask someone at home to wave a hand or something if you can hear us. I'll take that as a yes, I guess.
Nobody replied.
No, somebody did up on the top
Somebody
right.
did.
Well, I can see up in the top right-hand corner there. Someone, whoever's up on the top there, put it. Brenda? Okay. Somebody still got.
Next to it here, Mike. I don't know, the mic is on.
There you go.
Oh,
Leave that off.
it's not, I don't think it's this.
There you go.
I don't know what's it.
Is the mic on that?
Yes, because I want people to be able to.
Oh, that's the problem.
Can I-
The mic on.
That mic's interfering with that computer.
All right, so I want to mute this.
Yes.
No, the one that they,
I don't have
Yeah,
it
mute the
here.
computer.
How's that? That better? Doesn't sound like there's any feedback now, so try that again. I turned my speakers down. Maybe my speakers were too
This
high.
thing has been off the whole time.
Okay.
or give them, use that mic, Dave.
Yeah, you can use
Give
that one.
them the wireless one.
Yep.
We could, yeah, we can do that.
All right. Hopefully we got that all taken care of. Everybody can hear. I believe we left off on page 14, which we schedule DA1, the appropriations of the highway fund townwide.
There really isn't much to do on
Yeah.
Nope,
the
we didn't.
DA fund. This is just basically a fund to replace any bridges in the town that have to be fixed or redone. It's pretty standard. I mean, there isn't much to do. It's only $42,700, and it pretty much is a wash, right, Dave?
Yep, exactly. The only thing that I would add is that if we are working with an engineering firm for the like an evaluation of infrastructure throughout the town, that we also engage that firm to also evaluate the bridge infrastructure, and there's 10,000 in appropriations in the DA 51-20-24 for that purpose.
So we're all in agreement, DA fund is good to go? Okay, let's move on to page 15. This will be the DB fund. Yeah, there's a phone, somebody's phone is ringing. It's not, it's a town line.
So this is just, start with special event insurance for $25,000.
Just a quick question, Dave. When I look at the 324 versus the 315, is that just for the 2% raise?
That's what I
Yes. Yep.
plus a couple of step raises, right?
Could be.
So if we were to look at that, that line over the 3-year period, we spent 302, or we budgeted 302,000 in 18. We budgeted 326 in 19. 225 and 20, 315 and 21, and we're up to 324 and 20, and the proposed 22. I believe the adjustment. I didn't put a heading on this page. Let's start over. We budgeted in 18, 345, 342 in 19, 345 and 20, 315 and 21, and they're proposing a $324,000 body for personal services in 22. So it's been, the line's been fairly consistent throughout the years. There isn't a lot of change.
Correct me, Dave, the budget has been consistent, but we also consistently have not spent all of the money, have we? I mean, typically, we don't spend it, isn't that right?
So that there are conservative estimates throughout the budget. The personnel service estimates, they are certainly estimates where we would like to include some provisions from a cautionary standpoint if we're to add an employee or two, or you wouldn't want for there to be the provisions necessary to pay for personnel services, but yeah, I mean, you are right.
The 55 going down, Dave,
Okay.
for equipment and capital outlay, do we know what that's for? Jason,
I know what it's for.
well, can you answer me then?
Yes, that line item actually should be 5112-2B. Our software doesn't have a letter next to it for whatever reason, it's just, so it actually is two different accounts. The 55,000 represents our drainage account. Buys all of our structures, basins, pipe, anything that has to do with drainage comes out of that account.
And when we go down, the next one, the 132, that's the CHIPS money?
That's correct.
And that doesn't really change year to year, the only time it changes is when you add.
Changes by road mileage, yeah.
Road mileage?
Yep, if we were to get more road mileage and we'd submit, we actually have some that we're waiting on deeds, that eventually, it'll be a little bit of a process, but by next year we can file for some more road length, and then, they'll give us whatever it is determined by that.
Can I ask if overtime is included in all of the .1s under the DB codes?
Here, hang on a second.
This is tough work.
Yes.
Finding the two,
Well, we did on the last,
they made their statement.
Oh, I'm sorry, am I not allowed to speak?
apparently not, so
Oh,
we'll do that at the public hearing, I guess, you can ask that question, Chairman. Jason, do those figures include overtime?
They do include overtime, and to be honest with you, explained that in the budget meeting, we explained it when we met with the budget committee. Yes, all the .1 includes a 2% raise, step raises, and overtime. The overtime takes into consideration 10 days of overtime for snow removal, 7 days of overtime for brush and weeds, and 7 days of overtime for road maintenance.
Thank you. Anybody on the board have any more questions?
100,000 that we put in for the reserve account, is that something that could be made up out of sales tax overage? I went to the next page, I'm on 16.
Yep, so that actually is funded through, directly from sales tax.
And last, on 16, I had a question, 20,000 that is unclassified revenue, resources, the revenues, what is that?
I think, are you referring to the sales other line, 2655? I think in the DD 2770, the unclassified revenue, it's 0.
Yeah, you're off one line, John, that's all.
No, I thought I was right. If I go up from state aid consolidated highway 25, and we have state aid others a blank, right?
No, state aid others is 25,000. Unclassified revenue is the blank. And then sales others is 20,000. Am I reading that wrong?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, and just to that point, you always want for that line to be 0, because you can't budget for something that you're not aware of, of.
That's a state aid other?
No, just that was a point to the unclassified revenue.
Okay.
So I had a question on DB 9010 at the top under employee benefits. It's up almost 35,000 from last year. Dave, I reached out to you on this one.
Yep.
You indicated it had something to do with an estimate that was off last year.
Yep.
So 106,500 is what we should expect?
That is a very accurate estimate.
Okay.
I used historical data to derive the estimate that was used historically, but this year I took it a little further and to more or less define what the actual cost will be, and then rounded up to probably the nearest 500.
Thank you.
So Dave, will that 106, 500 remain pretty consistent now, or? It'll probably go up every year, but I'm saying,
Retirement's a tricky one. The only retirement's actually one that's been going down, and that's due to how well the retirement system has been managed, I guess, by the comptroller's office, and basically by doing as well as they are in the market, they're able to drive the contribution rates downward. So that's one of the few items that it can go in either direction in any given year, and it's usually predicated on the health of the stock market.
yeah, my question, I guess, you said it went up considerably because of a calculation error.
Yep.
Is that just a one-time thing, or now that it went up because of that calculation error, will that continue to go on through? Am I saying that right?
I think it'll be fairly close to the 106,500, within like a 5% degree of plus or minus based on staff, that unless there's like significant staffing changes within the department, which I don't really anticipate. No, this is probably a fairly good estimate on a forward-going basis. It actually, I mean, this ties directly into the invoice that was provided from the state controller. It is in the budget binder within the section that was controller's estimates. And, it details how the costs were broken across the funds. And then, like I said, ties directly into the invoice that we'll be paying here in December.
If you go to page 17, the two numbers on 17 really are a wash. One's the appropriation and one's the revenue, correct?
Yep. So you have to recognize the revenue as a transfer from another fund because we had restricted within our general fund the amounts to replace the fuel island and cold storage building. So we actually recognize an expenditure from our general fund, which somewhat skews appropriations upwards, but that's just how it, that transfer is made and is accounted for. So that it's a like you said, John, has no taxpayer impact. Those resources have been set aside to be utilized to replace the fuel island and the cold storage building. By using the budget, we can actually transparently show our tax base that that is something that a project that we plan to complete in fiscal '22.
So are we looking at leaving it at 300,000? I know there was discussion about 6.
There was a discussion about trying to put the cold storage building on there too. I believe I sent you all an email this afternoon from Joel.
I'll wait.
I sent it as soon as Joel gave it to me. He apologized for the late bite having yesterday, but he didn't get to it until today. The total project, if we were to do the whole thing at once, it's probably going to be about $1.1 million.
Yep, so the 300,000 estimate that he originally provided, that actually included the cost to tear the tanks out of the ground. What they didn't capture in that original estimate was 10,000 for permitting costs. So this appropriation, may be increased by 10,000 to reflect that fuel island replacement. But based on the estimate that was provided by MJ, this may be one of those items where it may be better to, again, utilize one of the reserves that we have and place appropriations into that restricted fund and try to accumulate resources so that we don't have to issue that in a year or two and go about replacing both the cold storage building and the fuel island, in one shot. Otherwise, I would think it would, to complete both projects in 2022, we would certainly have to, we would maybe require to issue debt to pay the blue building. The costs were, fairly significant.
I think the board has to make a decision if we want to do one of these, none of these, or do neither of the projects in '22, but put aside funding again in '22 and '23, so that these can be done. Yes?
What exactly did Joel estimate for the cold storage building? What's the specs that he used for that?
For whatever we had given him before, from a couple years ago.
I think it's 930,000.
I'm looking at square footage, what the pad was, what basically the specs are for the building. I don't know what he went with.
It was whatever we had given him from before. 8,000 square foot building, give or take, was that about right?
Yeah, and along with those buildings, whatever the decided as well, you can always take that scope into consideration. Basically, sometimes you can size that down with a metal building of that sort, and then come back and add on to the end, but probably not as much of an expense on doing that. It's just a thought that you can go with.
Well, I mean, that would be up to you guys. If you think you could get by with a 5,000 or 6,000 square foot building for a couple of years, and, obviously a metal building is just, take one side off and, add it up.
It's a very simple structure, but.
Yep. That would be something for a discussion with you guys, to see what fits your needs.
Fortunately, we do have time between, now and even the preliminary and when, the budget will be adopted for, to have those discussions and see in what direction, everyone wants to move it.
I mean, it might almost be like going backwards, not backwards, but we have this much money, how big of a building can we put up? And if that's a number that you guys are comfortable with, then maybe we do that. We can get together tomorrow or Thursday and go over that if you want.
Well, along with that cost, Betty, we would have to increase the cost of the engineering.
Well, I think that was on,
The estimate was 130,000 for engineering
Correct.
costs.
right,
On top of 800,000 for construction costs, and that's where he derived the 930 for the blue building replacement. So then to that, we had another 310 for the fuel island and the permitting fees.
I didn't think that the removal cost was in there when I talked to Joel,
I got the impression that they were.
because when we talked about a budget for that, there's a lot of unknowns with the removal of the old tanks, because it's really unknown until you dig them up. And if you got contamination, it really escalates the price. But he was saying somewhere right around 50,000 would be a proper number for removal of the tanks and everything electrical. Yeah.
I don't know, the impression I had from Joel was that the 300, that price included, removal of the gas, removal of the tanks.
I just want to make sure we got enough to remove the tanks, because if we don't, that defeats the purpose for which we.
Well, we're talking engineering costs here, correct? So,
Well,
because
no, actually
one of the
talking
things, one of the things on here is the community center. Did you see that, find the email?
Yes,
Okay, it was the community center.
Well, it wasn't just the community center, it was
Assessment,
Right.
budget 25,000 for a full building regardless of any work done, okay. Have we looked at the cost, further cost on the Route 50 corridor?
yes.
How much is that going to be?
The zoning amendments and
Seeker, do we have an estimate from MJ?
the paperwork that needs to be done to allow the project allow the corridor to move onto the comprehensive plan and be amended would be about $25,000.
Where did that number come from? Do we have that in writing, a proposal?
We will tomorrow afternoon, Jackie's writing it up. And then the cost for the Route 50 corridor that we were talking before, Joel has informed me that would all be part of something called the TIP grant. And you're able to put your engineering costs into the cost of the project. And Route 50 is a state highway and North Line Road is a county highway, and MJ feels that the town should be able to bear very little of that cost because those roads are not ours. We are expecting letters from the DOT and the county in support of the project, which will go along with the application for the grant. And so when those letters get here, that will bolster our position for getting in line for one of the TIP grants. So the engineering costs will be covered
We're sure.
99%
As I said,
sure.
we're not underestimating some of these engineering costs.
Just to add, within this updated rendition of the tentative, there has not been a $20,000 increase in engineering costs. But that will be at the very minimum just for the building condition assessment. That appropriations will be made available for that purpose, and we can increase that line further as we find, as we obtain new information from the engineering firm.
Does that answer yours?
Well, in my discussions with Joel today about doing a total assessment of our buildings, we probably would look in somewhere in the $50,000 range. Because he estimated 25 for this building. He said that the outbuildings, like the pole barns, maybe look at 5,000, and then if you look at the town garage, that could be the $10,000 range, so he said between 40 and 50,000. That would give us a whole inventory and condition of all our buildings.
Look at the assessment cost for the village for their town hall. I can't remember the number that I heard today. It was quite high. And that was just the town hall. Or the village hall, I'm sorry.
I don't know what they did there.
I'll go back on that. Like Dave said, we have time for adjustments.
John, also, I don't know if you guys, also the building at the stump dump should probably.
I included that, yes. Basically, what I included was the stump dump, pole barn. We have the garage, the small garage and buildings and grounds. We have the highway garage. We have this building. I think that's it. Is that
If you included the buildings in that, that would be the only other.
So then we could add 25,000 to Joel's estimate of the 25 there.
Yeah, you have to remember what Joel gave you today is just budget figures.
Right, he said that.
And budget figures tend to be a little high for that very reason, because they are budget figures, so. But yes, I need to add to you what you're saying, 25 added to it
Would be 50.
Yeah.
And that would give us a full assessment of all the buildings,
of all our.
of all town buildings.
And just for clarity's sake, we're going to, on page 4, we're going to increase the appropriation for engineering contractual from 20,000 to 70,000.
Yes.
Okay.
So, just to my question, Dave, maybe I'm not going to ask it right. We look at the 300,000 for the fuel island, which we already know is not enough money. Do we appropriate what we think is enough money there, and then take it out of the fund balance down below as far as revenue?
In this, is this in regards to the fuel island only?
Yeah, well, I just use it as a fuel island only at this point.
Okay, so in the need that that $300,000 estimate wasn't sufficient, then basically there would be the need for a resolution to be made in 2022 by the board authorizing the appropriation of additional restricted resources for that purpose. But, you know, if we'd like to play it safe, you know, we certainly can increase the 50,000. We can add to the 300,000 estimate at this junction. And then what we would do is have an offsetting financing source, which is the unrestricted resources.
So you're saying that line H on page 2 would go to 350, and then reserve fund balance on line A for the fuel island would go up by 50,000 to 349.
Yep.
We can do that now instead of having to make a resolution in the middle of the year, or whenever that project gets off the ground.
So on page 7, under A 9950.9, interfund transfers to capital projects, we would increase the 299,950 by 50,000. And to Penny's point on page, well, then there's going to be another entry. On page 17, the 5031 transfers from other funds, that'll increase by 50,000. And then this information will be reflected in, or on page 2 in the summary of appropriations and revenues. Our, from the tentative, the 2788388, that'll be increased by 50,000. And the H, will then also be increased from 300,000 to 350,000.
My last question, for this section anyways, if we look at the cold storage building, which we probably don't have a real good handle on yet, if we decide in 2022 to do that, we can just do that with resolution transfers, correct?
It's the same exact process that I explained. If there was a shortfall, we would, a resolution would be made, and we would appropriate restricted resources and use them for that purpose.
Well, we don't have to have it in the budget.
No.
That's what I'm saying. Okay.
And then to the same respect, we could certainly appropriate, unrestricted resources, at any really point within the fiscal year, if we wanted to also subsidize the cost of that blue building or throw the local resources at the project.
So are we good with the DB funds?
I think I am.
Barb, Frank,
Good.
Mr. Isaacson?
Nothing further.
Thank you. Yep, let's move on, folks.
The ambulance scored 680, we're gonna accept that.
Yes.
Fire Protection District is set by contract, so we don't have anything to really discuss there.
Nope.
As far as the lighting district, I think we talked about this last.
I think we did
It's
too.
a little late. We were set as far as the amount of money we have in it to replace some poles if we have to.
So this is a lighting district that's a little different than our actual light poles. Those we would finance the repair costs within the general fund. This is strictly costs for delivery from National Grid to deliver energy from Constellation to I think it's 180 residents or so in a lighting district that was created by the town. basically special districts, they serve a subset of residents, and you know, they bear those costs because they're the residents that are benefited by those services.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, though, the only lighting district we have is right here in town center, isn't it?
I believe so, yes.
So I guess when it was set up, was it, I guess
It's called the
when
Heritage Hill Lighting District.
Heritage Hill?
And I guess what I would need to look at is the property tax roll or assessment roll, and I can tell you exactly what properties are provided to, I guess, the lighting service.
For a little historical record here, the Ballston Spa side of Geyser Crest was originally called Heritage Hills. So I think that's where the name for the lighting district came from.
So they have streetlights, is that what I'm understanding? Must be, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
They have National Grid, their overhead streetlights are on them. What you're referring to is our town district actually isn't one, but it's something that I would recommend the town board at some point look into. I know I've spoken to Bill about this. Our town center right now, currently all the light poles that John was referring to are essentially half and half. Half of our town center is actually on our town hall building's power source, so we're funding the lights off of that. The other half of town center is actually being charged to the business or homeowners wherever they lie in front of them. Basically anything that was done after 2015 is on the town hall's power source. I would recommend, I know Bill and I have talked about, we need to actually go over the town center guidelines again, maybe revamp some of the stuff. But it would be a time to, at least for the board to have it as a future project, if not soon, to get all the lights on one lighting district for that purpose. Again, I mean, we're actually charging the lights in town hall as if they're down in front of Stewart's, down almost to Geyser Crest. So it's something that you should be aware of and maybe come up with a plan. And create its own district for that. Maybe the business owners work together with the town, however they work it out, but they should all be on the same service.
I've spoken to the electrician about that very issue, and one of the issues is going to be trying to get everything on one service. There's connections and disconnections and sidewalk that need to be dug up, and it could get to be a rather extensive and expensive project trying to get everything on one line.
And on a high level, what I would equate a lighting district to is just the water district. So just kind of visualize your house is connected to the house next to you and the house next to them, and that's how you're serviced.
All these water districts, we have really not much. They're pretty much a wash for the most part.
Exactly. I guess, and the other purpose that, for which these funds could be used is to, for any maintenance or repair costs that if the village would incur for delivering the water to these residents. If there were a pipe that were to burst, these would be the resources that we would use to repay the village to repair those water lines.
I guess we're down lastly to the fire district, which we don't have a say-so in their budget, correct?
Correct.
We're just really the collecting agent.
Fire districts have their own governing union and have the ability to levy a tax on the residents that they serve. And we actually, like you had mentioned, we're just the collecting agency, and we collect taxes and return them to the fire district.
I guess one of the questions I have, I was trying to figure it out today, Dave. We're going to use the 700,000 excess sales tax to pay for the town hall additions?
The renovations, yep.
Correct. We, right now, don't have the 700,000, correct?
Right, I guess, what are we on,
We're at
500,000?
we're at almost 500 now,
Over?
over.
Yeah, over what we projected.
Because we have 2 more payments coming in, right?
We actually received payments all the way into February that pertain to the fiscal 2021.
The sales tax always lags 2 months behind.
Yeah.
So we have,
Our
Or-
final payment comes in February.
Right.
yes, which will include the December shopping season, so.
Basically, what we would just push the financing out of the general to the capital project, and then your fund is more or less reimbursed as the sales tax receipts come in. I actually haven't made the transfer from the capital, or the general fund to the capital projects fund, just due to the fact that we haven't been invoiced yet, and we still have a few $100,000 in resources from the original debt issuance to carry us through the next month or so.
I guess that was my question. Because the project's estimated to be done by the end of December, if we don't get our final payment until February, we'll have to take money from something, right? And transfer it, whether it be unfunded.
It's like unrestricted. I guess you don't even close your accounting records until a few months after the end of the fiscal. So all of these year-end transactions can occur, and you can account for them on the accrual basis of accounting. But yeah, I guess what you would theoretically be using prior to the receipt of your sales tax revenue is just unassigned fund balance.
Yeah, because your accounting doesn't have to be closed out until March.
Yep, exactly. Actually, it depends on the size of the town.
Yeah.
Anybody have any more questions or discussion items?
Mr. Supervisor.
Mr. Lewis?
On the B line, under the appropriated budgetary provisions, I see a $20,000 deficit from the proposed. I was just trying to get clarity on that. It went from
What page are you on, Bill?
Page 1 and 2, or, I don't have the
It would be
actual.
the budget committee's recommendation, the 673 to 653.
Oh, that sheet we handed out.
On the appropriations,
I'm believing it's the vehicle money put aside for the vehicle, but I'm not 100%
That,
sure.
so that bill was the, basically, we took the furniture out of the budget, and that's what that, amount pertained to.
Okay. So that was the 20.
Yours was a large,
It was the
because of the,
$19,000 for the furniture for the building.
because of the size of your
Okay.
department, yours was one of those larger,
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
So I guess my question is, as we go forward, and I know it's nice to say we have a tax decrease coming this year, but are we really being fair to the residents in our town when we have so many expenses that we know are coming up? Wouldn't it be more prudent to maybe run our taxes level and actually keep some of our unfunded reserve, I shouldn't say reserve accounts, but our unfunded balances?
yep, so.
Dave and I talked about that this afternoon, and that is an option that the board can, can discuss.
It would be set up as a reserve account. What is-
Basically,
I'm sorry, what do you call it?
It would be the same thing that we're doing for the highway department to put resources into their equipment, or vehicle and equipment reserve. We would use the budget to appropriate resources and, to push them into, at this point, we only have one other reserve fund for which we can do that, and that would be the replacement of the building and cold storage building, I'm sorry, the fuel island and cold storage building. So, yep, I mean, and that's what I really try to emphasize to everyone that's involved throughout this process, that the tax levy, it can wildly swing. It's what we're always, we're solving for this at the end of the process. There's a tremendous amount of information that goes, into this process, and the decisions that we ultimately make will drive the amount of taxes and the levy increase or decrease, up or down.
So we can work backwards, like you're saying, John, and fill in the, I don't want to call it the gap, but that number, we can solve for X working backwards, and that money can go into a
We only have one other established reserve at this point, so from a budgetary standpoint, we really only have the latitude to appropriate resources to increase the one other capital reserve.
and that's for the,
Unless the board were to establish a capital reserve between now and November 20th. But, a repair reserve would be, great, maybe an employee, they're called eval reserves, but, you can use it to pay costs incurred when your employees leave. We can make a retirement contribution reserve, that's another good option. We can establish a broad reserve for capital infrastructure, which allows for the use of those resources to be used to, for capital needs in a more broad manner, and there are other, there certainly are other ones that are available and, could utilize for this purpose.
I guess my question, to maybe simplify it a little bit, Dave, if we chose not to take as much appropriated fund balance for this budget, just drop that number, we can decide next year how to set up all our reserves. Instead of, it's kind of tough to try and do it right now in,
Yep.
you know, within a month to try and figure it all out.
I actually included a supplement, and just for perspective, over the past 20 years, we have averaged financing our budgets with $1.2 billion of appropriated fund balance. This budget includes proposed appropriations of about 608,000 at this point, so we are heading in the right direction. You know, we certainly can continue, you know, in that trajectory. I do think it's important to do this over, you know, a period of time. Just for,
So I guess as it stands right now, you've got quite a bit of work to do to plug in all the numbers that we've talked about in the last two workshops. Head towards a preliminary budget.
a solid, I think a solid 48 hours would be what I would need to take everything through these discussions and transition this from the tentative to the preliminary. And to that point, I have included the budget calendar for towns, just because time is becoming of the essence. The public, the preliminary budget will have to be filed with the town clerk before a public hearing can be held, and we need a 5-day notice for the public hearing. So I'm thinking by this Thursday, ideally would be we'd like to drop that date for a preliminary version to be made available for the public. If, that to stay within the time frame allotted by the state. There is the provision for the adjournment of hearings day to day, but that would require a contingent of the board to get together to adjourn the meetings, and I don't think we for that to happen.
November 5th is the day of the public hearing, correct? It has to be.
On or before the Thursday following the
Yep.
election. Yep.
That would be the 4th, right?
I think the 4th. The 4th is Thursday.
We do have an option to adjourn that meeting should something come up, but we don't.
Well, you still have to open.
Right, we have to open and close, we have to open the meeting, have an adjournment, and set another date. I think we're trying to avoid that.
I know, but when I look at it, I'm looking at Dave needs 48 hours, and I'm sure the town board would like to have the budget for at least 24 or 48 to go back through it.
Once the preliminary is put together, it actually needs to be advertised to the public for 5 days.
5 days before that.
So there would be time for everyone to. Oh, are you saying the board would like some time to review the changes that made prior
Correct.
to the? Okay. I can turn it around in one day. If not sooner, I will do what it needs to be done. That's providing for you guys to have, the time necessary to feel comfortable with, present this to Brenda for public posting.
I guess I have a question. We allotted 20,000 for the position evaluation, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. What are we doing with raises? Are we going straight 2%? What are we doing with it? Because I know some of the departments asked for higher increases.
In the amended tentative, or that I just,
Which you just
The new sheet that he's giving you out includes
I think-
2% raises.
I mean-
We all agreed?
Yeah, we did.
Doing just 2%.
Just 2% for
That's why I
everyone.
want to make sure that that's what's
Yeah.
coming in.
So that's
That's what
reflected.
that's what's in there
For
now.
Until we have that evaluation, you know,
Well, we did two things actually. One was to raise our part-time people to 20.
okay, well, I didn't agree on that, but that's okay.
Well,
I'd like to see the evaluation done, and that's my
Well,
thing. The handbook and the evaluation, I'd like to see that.
And then, once the evaluation was done,
So
and
what-
we had the new schedule, then we would make the
What happens if we
adjustments.
take money away from them? Is that possible? What
Well-
happens if the evaluation comes and it's less than, are we gonna follow it?
Well, the only way that it would be less than that is if the evaluation came in and said that, let's take a court clerk as an example. We are going to pay the court clerk the same, part-time, the same as a full-time clerk.
Right.
So
I
if the
understand
evaluation
this.
came back and said that full-time court clerk was making too much money, we're not going to reduce that.
We're not going to reduce that.
You can't.
I don't know,
how you
that's
could
my,
right now.
that's my question.
you can't take money away from
That's
someone
right,
who's...
that's why I'm hesitant about doing it before we have the evaluation. You can't take money away from people.
We're not doing it. We're paying the part-timers $20 an hour. We're putting enough money in the budget so that when this review comes back and it says 20 isn't enough, it should be 22 or
That's
21.50.
fine, what if it comes back to 19?
Then we give them 50 cents more an hour. They've been underpaid for how many years?
Well, what's the sense in doing an evaluation, paying all that money?
Well, we need to set a salary schedule.
Absolutely,
No matter what.
absolutely.
But seeing as we haven't done that yet, we gotta do something in our budget to appropriate the money. I mean, if we had to,
I understand appropriating the money.
yeah,
I'm talking about actual payout.
as it stands right now, we haven't actually paid out anything.
No, I know yet.
And we don't.
We're talking about the new.
It's the town board that has to.
So you want to leave people at $15.35 an hour until this assessment is done?
I don't see another solution.
We talked about it last week.
I know we talked about it.
Okay.
My question was still, how do you take money away if this, why are we paying for this evaluation if we're not going to follow it?
We aren't paying for that either yet. We were gonna discuss that. Because I think you can get it done with the county, using the county. It
Well,
costs
If it
us
comes to
nothing.
a vote, we'll have to decide.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And as far as paying people, we haven't decided that yet as a town board either.
Mhm.
We're just
Set
appropriating
the
the,
schedule, right, absolutely.
so,
I understand you're appropriating the budget, that's the
Yeah.
problem.
doesn't mean we haven't spent it, it doesn't mean we
Okay, I just
have
don't
to
want to
spend
run
it.
into a position where we're paying out money for an evaluation, and then we're wrong at what we did, and, so that'll come down, I guess, to the organizational meeting,
Yes,
okay?
so as it stands right now, we have to be, what, 4 days ahead of the 5th?
I believe it to be, I guess I would actually
Well-
look for Jim's clarification. I think it's just 5 days, and I don't believe there's.
5 days, you got it here, never mind.
Right.
Okay, I don't think that there's any, I don't think they have to do business days or.
Yeah, so that
That's
would
the
be
question I would
Sunday.
have. For Thursday, so that's Sunday.
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
I think as long as Dave has this done by Thursday evening, we could publish a public hearing, and that would give you guys, that would give us time to go over it on Thursday and Friday. I think we can still, we'll have to check with Jim tomorrow, but I think we can still set a public hearing for Thursday on next Friday. Does that make sense? Give you guys time to
Well,
look
we
at the
can set
budget?
the public hearing at our meeting tomorrow.
Right, when we
We
talk to
have to
Jim.
do that.
The document needs to be available for inspection 5 days before
Which would mean it has to be available on Sunday.
Sunday.
So the board could have a special meeting to approve it. We could do that on a Saturday morning. That would give Dave 2 days to, and not overload him, and that would give us a couple of days to look at.
And we can set that special meeting tomorrow, because we can't do town business tonight. So we can set that special meeting on tomorrow night's agenda,
Correct.
under new business.
You're
Other than that, are we pretty set?
I think I am.
Frank, are you all right?
Good.
Okay. Ms. Kerr? Mr. Isakson?
I'm all set.
Just, I apologize, just one clarifying item for myself. Where would we like from, like, it's like a group from a taxation standpoint? Do we want to stay flat, within the tax levy limit?
I
Do what
personally
needs to
think
be done?
staying flat makes sense to everyone.
I think with the help of the budget committee and their suggestions and the work we've been done, I think we can stay flat.
Okay,
So
well.
that's the number you want to work back to.
Okay, I don't do that accordingly.
I think we're all going that direction, we're all kind of looking at the conservative side. We don't want to be put in a position where we have to draw off our reserves for some unknown this coming year. Is that what you're saying, John?
Well, and we don't want to be put in a position, you're correct. And what I got thinking about today is we had this building that we're going to spend $1.5 million, give or take. And we had $700,000 worth of excess sales tax this year. If you added those two together, we could have actually done the total rehab on that building and put our meeting room on the first floor. And we didn't do
You
that.
can't budget on money you don't have
Yeah,
yet.
I agree,
And
but if
that's-
we
Just
keep,
like the sales tax estimate for next year.
my point is that if we keep cutting these funds,
Oh, yeah. And I've complained
we'll
about
never be
that.
in that
I've
position.
complained about that since, for 8 years on it.
Like we talked about before, it's a very fine line that we walk between fund balances and having too much or not enough. Like,
Overtaxing,
yes,
yes.
and the state, when we go to these conferences, they tell you that if you have more unappropriated fund balances, some people are going to look at that as you're overtaxing your residents. And again, we talked about this last time. Every town is different, every municipality is different. Nobody knows if there was a decent formula or figure for it, the state controller would say you can have 10% of your budget in, unappropriated fund balance, but every town is different. So they don't know what's a good balance or a bad balance until they look at you.
Well, truthfully, I can give you a formula for it, Benny. If you have a good plan and a good inventory, you know 5 years from now that you're gonna have to replace this, 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 and this. And you have to have this amount of dollars, this amount of dollars, and this amount of dollars. So you either have to bring it in from taxing people, or you gotta bring it in from other sources. And if you keep going without a plan, you do the same thing we've done for the last 40-some odd years. We come in budget time, and we look at it and say, holy, we can't raise the taxes. And then we end up in the position we're in.
And I think that's where Dave and the committee and us have decided to start that up with a 5-year capital plan or a 5-year funding plan, whatever you want to call it. I mean, highway, we are putting money away every year for them, so when they need trucks and equipment, it's there. I think we are getting to where we need to be. It's not going to happen this year, we all know that. And it's probably not going to happen next year either, but like I said, if it's a 4 or a 5-year plan, I think in the long range, the town can get to where we need to be.
And in the meantime, we're behind the eight ball kind of
Yeah.
here, because everything has been kind of neglected and not planned on. So I think when we do these budgets, we have to look into making up some of that ground.
Exactly.
And that's why some of these funds are being appropriated this year, to get us a little closer to caught up. Anything else? Okay, with that, I will adjourn this budget workshop. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.